Hello, and welcome. In this video, we will be conducting a case analysis of a significant Supreme Court decision from the Philippines. The case is titled Thenamaris Philippines, Inc. versus Court of Appeals, with the case number GR number 191215, decided on February 3, 2014. By the end of this analysis, you will be able to: first, identify the key facts and background of a legal dispute. Second, articulate the central legal issues that the court must resolve. Third, understand the Supreme Court's ruling and the legal principles that form the basis of that decision. And fourth, apply these principles to analyze the court's reasoning, also known as the ratio decidendi. Let's begin by establishing the factual foundation of this case. First, let's lay out the facts and background of the case. This will give us the context we need to understand the legal arguments. The case originated from a complaint filed by Amanda C. Mendigoran, the widow of a seafarer named Guillermo Mendigoran. Guillermo Mendigoran had a long career with Thenamaris, working for 27 years, first as an oiler and later as a second engineer. Tragically, during the term of his employment contract, Guillermo was diagnosed with and subsequently died of colon cancer. His widow Amanda filed a complaint with the labor arbiter seeking various benefits. Her complaint included claims for death benefits, unpaid salaries, sickness allowance, reimbursement of medical expenses, and damages. Now, let's trace the journey of this case through the different courts. The labor arbiter initially ruled in favor of Amanda Mendigoran, ordering Thenamaris to pay death benefits, medical expenses, and damages. However, Thenamaris appealed this decision to the National Labor Relations Commission, or NLRC. The NLRC reversed the labor arbiter's ruling. The NLRC's reversal was based on a key legal point. It held that the 2000 POEA standard employment contract, not the 1996 version, was controlling. The 2000 contract requires that for death benefits to be awarded, the death must be work-related. The NLRC found that Amanda Mendigoran failed to prove that her husband's colon cancer was work-related. Amanda Mendigoran then filed a motion for reconsideration with the NLRC, but it was denied on June 29, 2009. Her counsel received this denial on July 8, 2009. This date is crucial because it starts the clock for the next step in the legal process. The next step was to file a petition for certiorari with the Court of Appeals. Under the rules, she had 60 days from July 8 to file this petition. This means the deadline was September 6, 2009, which happened to be a Sunday, so the actual deadline was September 7th. However, on September 8th, one day after the deadline, Amanda Mendigoran filed a motion for extension of time to file the petition. She cited her counsel's heavy workload as the reason. The Court of Appeals, in a resolution dated November 20, 2009, noted that the petition was filed 15 days late and had procedural flaws. But, in the interest of substantial justice, it entertained the petition and allowed Amanda to correct the deficiencies. Thenamaris filed a motion for reconsideration, arguing that the CA should have dismissed the petition outright because the motion for extension was a prohibited pleading and was filed late. The Court of Appeals denied this motion, giving Amanda one last chance to comply with its earlier order. This is the point where Thenamaris decided to elevate the case to the Supreme Court. So to recap, we have a seafarer's widow seeking benefits, a labor arbiter ruling in her favor, an NLRC reversing that ruling, and a Court of Appeals trying to give her a chance to appeal, despite procedural missteps. This sets the stage for the Supreme Court's intervention. Now that we have the facts, let's identify the core legal questions that the Supreme Court had to answer. These are the issues. The petition filed by Thenamaris raised two main issues. The first issue is whether the Court of Appeals committed grave abuse of discretion by entertaining the petition for certiorari, even though it was filed beyond the mandatory 60-day period required by the rules. In other words, was the CA wrong to allow the petition to proceed, given that it was filed late? The second issue is whether the Court of Appeals committed grave abuse of discretion by ignoring a recent Supreme Court ruling, Laguna Metz Corporation v. Court of Appeals, which stated that motions for extension of time to file a petition for certiorari are no longer allowed. This second issue is critical because it questions the CA's authority to grant the extension in the first place, especially in light of a clear Supreme Court precedent. So the entire case hinges on the interpretation and application of procedural rules, specifically the 60-day period for filing a petition for certiorari and the permissibility of extensions. To resolve these issues, the Supreme Court had to look at the relevant rules and its own precedents. This is where the Supreme Court rule and the legal principles come into play. The central rule in question is Section 4 of Rule 65 of the Rules of Court, which governs petitions for certiorari. The Supreme Court explained that this rule was amended by AMNO the 7th of July, 12 SC. The key change was the deletion of a paragraph that previously allowed for extensions of time to file the petition for compelling reasons. The Supreme Court's interpretation of this deletion is a fundamental legal principle. The Court stated that, as a rule, an amendment by the deletion of certain words or phrases indicates an intention to change its meaning. Therefore, the removal of the paragraph on extensions meant that extensions are no longer allowed. The 60-day period is now strict and non-extendable. This principle was firmly established in the case of Laguna Metz Corporation versus Court of Appeals, which was decided in 2009. In Laguna Metz, the court explicitly held that the 60-day period for filing a petition for certiorari is non-extendable. It emphasized that the purpose of the amendment was to prevent the abuse of certiorari petitions to delay cases. However, the Supreme Court also acknowledged that there are exceptions to the strict application of procedural rules. This is the principle of liberality in the application of rules. The Court has relaxed rules in cases involving persuasive and weighty reasons, substantial justice, or excusable negligence. This principle is rooted in the idea that procedure should serve justice, not hinder it. The Court's prerogative to relax rules is mindful of the duty to reconcile the need to speedily end litigation with the parties, right to due process. It's a balancing act between efficiency and fairness. So the Court had to decide which of these two principles, strict application or liberality, should prevail in this specific case. Now we arrive at the heart of the analysis, the ratio decidendi, or the reason for the decision. This is the Supreme Court's reasoning for its ruling. The Court began by applying the strict 60-day rule. As we established, the deadline for Amanda Mendegoren to file her petition or a motion for extension was September 7, 2009. She filed her motion for extension on September 8, one day late. The Court emphasized a fundamental rule of remedial law. A motion for extension must be filed before the expiration of the period sought to be extended. If it's filed late, it's of no effect. Therefore, the Court concluded that Amanda Mendegoren's motion for extension should have been denied outright. Since the motion for extension was invalid, the petition for certiorari itself, which was filed on September 22nd, was also filed late. The Court called it a mere scrap of paper with no remedial value whatsoever. Next, the Court addressed the principle of liberality. It acknowledged that rules can be relaxed in exceptional cases. However, the Court found that Amanda Mendegoren's case did not fall under these exceptions. The reason she offered for the delay, her counsel's heavy workload, was deemed insufficient. The Court reiterated that the excuse of heavy workload is often self-serving, and by itself is not a valid reason to relax the rules. The Court reiterated that the excuse of heavy workload is often self-serving and, by itself, is not a valid reason to relax the rules. Furthermore, the Court pointed out that even if the late filing were excused, Amanda Mendegoren's petition was still plagued by numerous procedural infirmities. She failed to attach required documents, and even after being given a chance to cure the deficiencies, she still failed to fully comply. But the most compelling reason for the Supreme Court's decision was the finality of the NLRC's resolution. The NLRC's resolution denying Amanda's motion for reconsideration became final and executory on July 18, 2009, 10 days after her counsel received it. This was long before she even filed her motion for extension. The principle of finality of judgments is a cornerstone of the legal system. A decision that has acquired finality becomes immutable and unalterable. It cannot be modified in any respect. Once a judgment is final, the issues are deemed resolved, and the winning party has a vested right to its execution. The court emphasized that there must be an end to litigation. Because the NLRC's resolution was already final and executory, the Court of Appeals had no jurisdiction to entertain the petition for certiorari. The Supreme Court concluded that the CA committed grave abuse of discretion by extending underserved and unwarranted liberality to Amanda Mendigorn. Grave abuse of discretion occurs when a court acts with caprice, whim, or despotism, or evades a positive duty enjoined by law. The CA's actions, noting the late petition, accepting a flimsy excuse for delay, and giving multiple chances to cure defects, were seen as a defiance of the rules and the Supreme Court's directives. Finally, let's summarize the Supreme Court's ruling and its implications. The Supreme Court granted the petition filed by Thenamaris. It reversed and set aside the resolutions of the Court of Appeals. The court found that the CA had committed grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction. Consequently, the petition for certiorari filed by Amanda Mendigorn with the Court of Appeals was dismissed. This means that the NLRC's decision, which reversed the labor arbitrator's award of benefits, stands. Amanda Mendigorn's claim for benefits was ultimately denied. The legal principles applied in this case are clear. First, the 60-day period for filing a petition for certiorari is mandatory and non-extendable. Second, a motion for extension must be filed before the expiration of the period. Third, the excuse of heavy workload is not a compelling reason to relax the rules. And fourth, once a judgment becomes final and executory, it is immutable, and no court has jurisdiction to review it. This case serves as a strong reminder of the importance of procedural rules in the administration of justice. While courts may sometimes relax rules in the interest of substantial justice, this liberality is not absolute. It must be exercised with caution and only in truly exceptional circumstances, not to condone negligence or to undermine the finality of judgments. We have now completed our case analysis. You should now be able to identify the facts, issues, ruling, and reasoning of a legal case. Thank you for watching. Let's quickly recap what we've covered in this case analysis. We started with the factual background, learning about Amanda Mendigorn's complaint for death benefits after her husband's passing, and how the case moved from the labor arbiter to the NLRC and then to the Court of Appeals. We then identified the key issues, whether the CA committed grave abuse of discretion by entertaining a late petition and by ignoring Supreme Court precedent on extensions. We examined the Supreme Court rule, Section 4 of Rule 65, and the legal principles of strict interpretation of rule amendments and the finality of judgments. The ratio decidendi, or the court's reasoning, was based on the fact that the motion for extension was filed late, the excuse of heavy workload was insufficient, and most importantly, the NLRC's decision was already final and executory, depriving the CA of jurisdiction. Finally, the ruling was to grant the petition, reverse the CA's resolutions, and dismiss Amanda Mendigorn's petition for certiorari. This case highlights the critical balance between procedural rules and the pursuit of justice. While courts strive for fairness, they must also uphold the stability and finality of the legal process. Let's take a moment to reflect on the broader implications of this decision. This case reinforces the principle that procedural rules are not mere technicalities. They are designed to ensure the orderly and efficient administration of justice. The Supreme Court's decision sends a clear message that these rules must be respected. It also clarifies the limits of judicial liberality. While courts have the discretion to relax rules in exceptional cases, this discretion is not boundless. It cannot be used to excuse negligence, especially when it undermines fundamental principles, like the finality of judgments. The court's role is to apply the law, not to act on caprice or whim. For legal practitioners, this case is a crucial reminder. It underscores the importance of diligence in meeting deadlines and complying with procedural requirements. The consequences of even a single day's delay can be severe, leading to the dismissal of a case and the loss of a client's right to appeal. In conclusion, the Thenamaris case is a landmark decision that clarifies the strict application of the 60-day period for filing a petition for certiorari and the limited circumstances under which procedural rules may be relaxed. It is a testament to the Supreme Court's commitment to upholding the rule of law and ensuring the finality of judgments.